This morning, I'm putting in the clutch and the flywheel. The flywheel's already in place and bolted in. There's 6 bolts, and I used ARP bolts, which are chrome moly, very strong, and they get torqued to 85 foot-pounds with Loctite lubricant. And that's the specifications of the ARP. And there's also a pin also that goes into here. There's a lot of debate whether that pin is necessary, but for a $6 part, put it in. $6 is going to break you on this build, you're in trouble. This is the pilot bearing. The shaft from the transaxle is going to go and rest into, or going into there, and it's going to turn with the transaxle. Keep things aligned nicely. This is a custom flywheel. Comes with the kit, and it changes from, makes the transition from an LS engine to whatever transaxle you're going to use. In this case, this is a Ricardo transaxle going in. It's what's used on like a 2005 Ford GT, the modern day Ford GT40. When you torque these, once they're all lined, all the holes are lined up and the alignment pin is in, you do it gradually and keep crisscrossing in a pattern until you get to 85 foot-pounds. You're going to have something that'll keep the engine from turning, because when you get up around, I don't know, I'd say 60 pounds, the engine's going to want to start turning. You can put bolts into here and put a piece of wood and hold it, just anything to keep the engine from turning. You want to use a good torque wrench when you do it, not the old-fashioned one when I was a kid with the little needle you did, and you pushed it and the needle moved, and they were highly inaccurate. Just a good one that you can turn and adjust, down to the foot-pound or Newton meters. It has it on there, foot-pounds and Newton meters. So this is torqued in, and now we're getting ready to do the clutch. This clutch is out of the Ford GT, and it's a double clutch. You've got a plate like the flywheel surface, and then the clutch sits, the actual clutch plate sits down on there, and then there's another plate, and I've already cleaned them, and I'll just wipe them one more time before I put it in there. And as you can see, they can only go one way in there. Everything is precision. Fits down there nicely, and I marked it which way, the orientation of the actual clutch inside there. And the final one, you see it's marked flywheel side. So the clutch is actually going to sit right up in there, and when the clutch isn't depressed, the pressure plate, which is this whole mechanism here, is going to put pressure on the clutch and presses against the flywheel and turns the transaxle. And what happens is the shaft that's coming out of the transaxle looks like this, and sits in here like this. So what it's doing is the teeth on that shaft hold, this shaft is just like it is in the transaxle, except for it's obviously metal, not plastic. This is an alignment. And so it makes the clutch sits in there. So when the clutch is depressed and you're shifting gears, the flywheel's turning, but it's not making contact with the clutch. So the transaxle will just sit idle. When the clutch is released, this clutch will actually be pressed against here, just like I did there. And now, as the flywheel turns and the engine turns, it'll make the transaxle turn. So, the pressure plate has a lot to do with how much force the clutch will hold. And this setup is rated at 1,500 horse. That's a lot of power, a lot more power than this engine's actually putting, so it's nice and safe. You know you're not going to blow out your transaxle. So one of the tricky parts of putting in the clutch, you see these plates can move around, is having things aligned. If the shaft isn't aligned going through here, when you go to put the transaxle in, you'll never get it in. So they have these alignment tools here, and they're specific for each one, and you pop it in, and as it goes in, it's going to keep everything aligned. This is a very, very tight tool. It's going to keep it very tight. So this is going into pilot bearing here, and now the clutch is aligned all the way through with this tool. So now it's just a matter of bolting it up. So you have the correct size bolts for it. There's 9 of them. A lot of strength holding this guy in there. And you just get it aligned, just figuring where the top bolt is, just to get started. And you notice I didn't put Loctite on here yet. I just want to get a couple of them aligned, make sure everything's okay. So once I put the Loctite on there, I know everything's good. Alright, so the alignment tool is all the way in there, into the pilot bearing, the clutch, so we know the clutch is aligned and it looks good. So what I'm going to do is now actually put the Loctite on the bolts. You don't need a huge amount of Loctite. It's not like the more you put, the better it's going to hold. And surprisingly, these bolts are only going to get torqued to 25 pounds. What happens is what's really holding them in there is the back pressure from the pressure plate. As I tighten these down, you're going to see this that's sticking out this way actually change its position. I took out 3 that didn't have Loctite. And everything should go in nicely. Shouldn't be fighting them at all. They should go right in, turn by hand. That's a good way to know that everybody's lined up the way it's supposed to be. So take care of these three that I haven't put Loctite on yet. So by the way, this is obviously a different build than the one I was working on all winter. This is a LS7. It's going into this car, into the Ricardo transaxle. When we do that, you'll see how much bigger. And yes, I have an extra bolt. There's only 9. That's a box of 10. So I'm going to get them all flush with the surface, not putting any pressure on them yet. Because as I start to give them pressure, there's a little gap in between here and the flywheel right now, and that's going to compress. I just want them all at the same starting spot. You can see in here too, between the engine, there's a plate that's custom made, comes with the kit. It's all aluminum, and it makes the transition for the mount from, in this case, the LS engine, the LS7 to the Ricardo transaxle. You couldn't just bolt the Ricardo up to, the Ford Ricardo transaxle up to Chevy engine, the GM. So there's many forms of the transitions. The last car, the red car, that most of the videos are, that was the transition between the LS3 and a Porsche G96. So this looked a lot different. But if you look down here, this mount, the transition mount, allows you to mount the back of the engine to the actual chassis. So the engine is solid mounted by the engine mounts up front, right into the chassis, and solid mounted via this to the chassis also. So this engine is not going anywhere. You might think that you get a lot of vibration through the frame, but with the proper damplifiers, you don't feel it at all. And so you're saving a lot of torque and horsepower that gets, the engine's not, when you rev it, it's not trying to turn, it's just solid right there. And so what I'm going to do now is gradually, in an alternating pattern, just start bringing this plate in. And this is right there is starting to move. So as one out of the 3 went in, it caused the other ones now to be loose. I'm just going a little bit, let this one catch up here. So now all 9 bolts are even, so now I'm going back to the starting point and bring that one in. Crisscross the bottom here, bring that one in, and then over to this side, bring that one in, and just gonna stay in that fashion. And as you bring it in, you can really feel the pressure of the pressure plate. This ring out here with the teeth, that's the starter ring. That's when you go to start the engine, the starter motor sends in a gear, which then engages here, and then turns the whole mechanism, the flywheel and everything. So, and the engine also. So that way you don't have to get out of the car and crank the engine by hand like the way old days. So eventually you get to a point, and then you can't tell because you're not turning the ratchet, but it gets to the point where the bolts hit a stop, which means this part here of the pressure plate clutch mechanism is going in as far as it can into the flywheel. So now it's in there solid. And note how much this material changed in here. It was sticking out like this, and now it's flat in there. And the alignment tool is still in there, so we know everything's lined up nicely. Okay. Now I didn't give much pressure at all to do that. Now I'm going to actually torque them down. You probably can't see it, but there's 20, 30, 40, 50, all the way up to 150 foot-pounds here. And as I turn it this way, I get less amount. When I turn it this way, I get more. Right now, there's 20. Lock it so it won't turn when you're turning it. Get the proper size Allen head socket. This is 6 millimeter because they're metric. I want to strip these guys, and then just going to start out, turn it till it clicks. If you keep going past the click, it'll torque more than it's supposed to. So it has a little click and give, and you just stop at that point. It's a little bit harder when you're doing a lot more torque because you're really putting pressure. This is such a little bit of force. So I've done them all in alternating now, just going around and just checking them. Not actually turning any of them. I just want to make sure that everybody's good. Okay, and everybody's good. So you can mark them if you want, just to let yourself know that they've been torqued. And so that's the clutch install. The only thing left to do is take out the alignment tool, which I have a feeling is not going to come out super easy because that was really tight going in there. That's the way you want it, so I'm going to have to actually use a